If you were in the gifted and talented program growing up, that means you were likely in the top 5%, meaning you were in the top 5% of your class on standardized testing, you exhibited exceptional ability in the creative or performing arts, or you exhibited unusual behavioral patterns that indicated advanced capabilities. This is only about 1 in 20 students who qualify as gifted. And as I've talked about in many of my other videos, there is a huge imprint that this left on our psyche. Because between the ages of 0 and 3, we are extremely programmable. And many of us were tested even earlier than kindergarten and maybe even attended some pre-gifted schools or were tested by psychiatrists in our very young formative years. Between the ages of 3 and 7, we are in theta brainwaves, which is still very programmable. And then by the time we're 7, between 7 and 12, it moves into alpha, which is still a lightly programmable state, which many people use when they're trying to reformat their belief systems through subliminals or positive affirmations. So what I found interesting is that most gifted programs stops around 6th grade, which is about when you are 12. And they still continued on in high school or in junior high from at least my experience, where you would do advanced math or college and AP courses. But for the most part, when you were between kindergarten and 6th grade, and if you were in the gifted program during those years, it was a little bit more individualized and focused on other creative tests and things that we've all talked about in these groups. So what does that mean for us now? Many of us, I found, have suffered from something I like to call gifted kid burnout. You're probably familiar with that term too. It comes from a lifetime of constantly having to perform for people, probably because you were considered some kind of golden child in your family if you were in the gifted program. So in a way, it almost sets us up for a form of narcissism. And narcissism doesn't necessarily have to be a negative thing. Many people who do have narcissistic personality disorder, of course, are very negative and think that the world revolves around them and they're grandiose in their thinking. But what if you were programmed to be a narcissist, but you used your narcissism for something good? So as gifted kids, if you guys remember watching programs like Free the Horses, where they told you that you were capable of anything, you may have grown up with the belief that you were special, that you were different, especially if you're being pulled out of classes early. But how does that translate into the adult world? Once you get to an even playing field with all of these other people who are no longer being separated, you're no longer being separated by being called gifted. Usually by the time you're in high school or junior high, while you may be in accelerated or advanced classes, for the most part, you're not as isolated as you were in elementary school. And by the time you are 12, 13, 14, and now your pineal gland is opening up and you are going through puberty and your hormones are changing, your psyche's already been implanted in those early formative years. So you likely carried the traits of gifted children, aka being a very high performer, probably some kind of people pleaser, and you probably put a lot of pressure on yourself to live up to the expectations that were placed on you in childhood. And when you didn't, if you didn't live up to those expectations in adulthood, it likely caused some kind of depression or some kind of mental illness that may have manifested as some form of neurodivergent, especially if you were in what we're calling the second group. So the first group of gifted kids, from a lot of videos that I've seen and people that I've talked to, ended up doing well in life and going on to programs that they may or may not have been recruited for. Maybe they've got higher positions in society, etc., and they're doing well. And then you had the second group of kids who often, again, ended up as neurodivergent or struggling with substance abuse and just some form of struggling, maybe college dropouts or just having a hard time in life. And I find that very interesting because most of our other classmates, so the other 95% who are not qualified as gifted, grew up with regular educational programming, which I wasn't in that, so I don't really necessarily, I don't have like many memories of childhood, period. And I don't know if that's because of the gifted program or just because I don't remember much of childhood. But if you think about what are they teaching the regular kids versus what are they teaching gifted kids, we know for a fact that a lot of us who were gifted kids have a lot of memories of things like the gateway tapes, and we've got memories of ESP and sleepwalking and astral traveling and lucid dreamings. And if you're anything like me, when you try to do a guided gifted meditation, you saw weird warehouses in your visions that may or may not have been real, or maybe they were dreams. If you were in the gifted program, you were probably taken into a weird warehouse or a weird closet at some point, or a trailer with no windows to do testing on you. So you've been in these weird places, and your classmates were not subjected to that. So they got to grow up with the herd mentality and be like everybody else, while you might have eventually been considered or turned into a black sheep. Now, is that from your childhood programming, being taken out of class early, being told that you were special, and then entering a society where we play by everybody else's rules, the other 95% of rules? And maybe you grew up feeling isolated and you felt different, and you felt like because of your early childhood upbringing, or maybe being taken out of class and being labeled as special, perhaps you always felt like you couldn't relate to your everyday regular person, even if you tried to. Because as much as it may be a badge of honor to be taken out of class and to be considered something special, you also kind of grow up feeling, again, isolated, and feeling like that isolation can be a negative thing because you're missing out on a lot of other things that your peers are. Plus, it might make you a target to bullying. And I don't know about you guys, I've heard other people talk about how they were bullied too in elementary school or grade school or high school. I had an eye problem, which I talked about the other day in my last video, how I'm blind in one eye. And when I was younger, I had a really bad lazy eye from it, and I'm sure it still acts up from time to time. I don't really notice it as much anymore. So is that like from law of attraction or something? I don't know. Or did it get strengthened with age? I don't know. But when I was younger, it was really bad. And I remember that was like the one thing that people would always comment on when they met me. And I was kind of known as the girl with the messed up eye. So that also really imprinted my psyche and gave me really low self-esteem, because not only was I in the gifted program and you always had to be taken out of class and you could never do what your peers were doing, and then by the time high school rolled around, all of my cars coming, but all of my friends and people that I grew up with were in your standard college prep, like the regular classes. So I was always in the gifted classes, and then I didn't really hang out with a lot of the gifted people. So it was like this weird, I didn't find myself in any cliques in high school. I found myself as a loner who like hopped around to the other cliques and kind of, tried on those different identities. So that kind of is actually an interesting segment into my next thing that I wanted to talk about, because now I want to get into deprogram. How do we deprogram ourselves? So if the gifted program led to feelings of burnout, overperforming, isolation, feeling different, maybe even negative forms of narcissism, how do we reframe that, and how can we change that? I want to share my personal experience with that, because I was part of the second group that struggled with mental illness. There's a plane again. I don't know how loud that is, so let's let it pass. I struggled with mental illness growing up, especially in my, I was gonna say in around the age of 15, which is really weird because I think, here's the other thing, total side note, but the DARE program, DARE, I forget what it stands for, the program where they would have a police officer come in and talk about how GRUGS are bad for you, and weed was somehow the gateway drug. Interesting, because it's like, I wonder if that triggers anything in your memory as a gifted kid when you listen to the gateway tapes as a kid, if there's something in your subconscious that remembers that somehow. And a lot of people I find who grow up to be part of group B have an overdependence on marijuana. And I call it an overdependence because most people probably don't think twice about smoking every single day. But if you have to alter your mind every single day, and you can't admit to yourself that that is not normal, then the brainwashing has worked on you. It certainly worked on me, and I certainly needed some tough love to make me realize, like, I'm not supposed to grow up being dependent on a chemical. And again, like there's many reasons that people take substances, and I'm not trying to like tell people not to take them. I'm just sharing my own experience and how I broke out of my own programming, because for many years I was a person that, you know, drank the Kool-Aid, and I went to see a therapist, and I got diagnosed with other things, and I saw many doctors and did many rounds of talk therapy and a lot of research on the internet, and I tried a lot of the different psych meds out there for ADHD, for depression, for generalized anxiety disorder, for bipolar and borderline, all those things. And I'm kind of, in a way, feel lucky that I started them at a young age at 15, because I got a full decade of experience in my late teens, early adulthood with how they don't work. At least they didn't work for me. And what I've observed in a lot of my friends, even people that weren't in the gifted program that tend to be on these medicine for years, they might help them initially, but they don't tend to give you any real tools for how to deal with real life. So when life inevitably comes back around and your medicine stops working, because eventually your body's going to get used to a dose and it's going to require more for it to be normal, until you're like dependent on much higher doses of these medications. So now you're dependent on the system. You're dependent on whatever high prices they want to raise you. And again, I've had experiences with medication where my doctor's office was closed for the weekend, or something didn't come through with my insurance and I couldn't afford it. So I felt like a true addict going off of my prescribed medication for a couple days because my doctor wasn't around, or because something with insurance and I didn't have the money for it. And that freaked me out. And I had that experience around the time I was 27, and I was like, wow, I'm like dependent on these things for my mental health. Like if I don't take them, I'm very sad, right? Very sad. And it started to give me this mentality like I have to, you know, a magical pill is gonna cure everything. But in my experience, it may have only worked temporarily, like when you get the new dose of medicine. But if you're still doing the everyday things that most young adults are doing, like they're going out for happy hour with their friends, they're drinking, they're eating junk food, they're working soul-sucking jobs that are very stressful, they probably have responsibilities in their marriage or with their children, so they don't get a ton of time for themselves, they don't have time to meditate, they don't have time to ground themselves in nature, they're slathering on the sunscreen, or they live in a state like Ohio or somewhere in the Midwest where you don't get natural sunlight. And like all of those things, at least for me, contributed to my negative state of mental health. And doctors never talked to me about my diet. I mean, maybe they did. Maybe they asked me a question like, how many drinks do you have a week? And then I was, you know, it's my fault that I lied on them because I didn't know any better. I was in my 20s and was like, how many drinks do I have a week? And then you start adding like 7 or 8 drinks a night when you go out to the bar binge drinking with your friends. And you're like, what is that? Like 70 drinks a week? Like 7 times 7 is, oh, that's like 49. I'm way under or way over. But you know, even if you have like 5, or if, as a woman, 5 drinks a night is a lot. But if you're a 21-year-old, 5 drinks may seem like nothing. So 5 times 7, that's 35 drinks a week. Like that is so bad for your liver. And I remember when I was 27, I went to the doctor and like I had fatty liver from it, which is a precursor to cirrhosis. And I didn't know any better. I thought I was a normal, like doing what normal kids did. So my point in telling you all that is that I didn't have coping mechanisms other than what was provided to me through the system. And again, not hating on the system, but I know that there's other people out there like me who the system does not work for. So I want to provide you with an alternative, and I want to show you how I climbed out of the dark hole that I was in all by myself. Maybe not all by myself, maybe with help from other people here and there who showed up on my path and showed me the way. But I came up with my own system that helps me heal and helped me deprogram myself. So the first thing that I did was, when I was 27, I think through divine intervention, I met somebody who I went to high school with who was sober, and he had a glow about him. And I was like, what is going on with this guy? Like, he was so self-assured and confident and just like so much better than I'd ever seen anyone. He was authentic and radiating. And he said he was sober. So I started following around to all these sober meetings. And then I realized like, wow, there's actually groups of people out here whose lives don't revolve around alcohol and mundane small talk, which I was getting so sick of in my late 20s. And then I started meeting people who were actually on paths to self-improvement. So I want to kind of like go back for a second and talk about the top 5% of gifted kids, because I have a theory that the top 5% of gifted kids are possibly children who don't succumb to the programming, especially if you were in group 2. There may have been a part of your intelligent mind that is like, something is off here. And if you, maybe that first part of the top 5%, maybe they weren't non-compliant, as we say, or maybe they are, who knows? I don't know. I'm just speculating and, repeating things I've heard from other sources. But my point is that perhaps there are people among us in society who are a little more rare, as in they can see through the lines, they start to think for themselves, and they're not thinking like the rest of the population, like sheep mentality, as a lot of people call it. So I feel like I fall into that category. I've always been a little different, and I've never wanted to be the same as everybody else. So when I saw that there were other people who actually were like me and they were not drinking, because I was like, even though I did the motions of like drinking, I didn't like it. I just did it because I thought that I was doomed to repeat a life of boringness, because I didn't know anybody else who was like me, who like didn't like the small talk, who wanted to have like real in-depth conversations and talk about like aliens, space, metaphysics, and spirituality and all that stuff. So I've kept it inside for so many years and just went through the motions of life, and saw my therapist and took my meds, and then went and did happy hour with my friends after my 9-to-5 job. But I was miserable on the inside, and I was wearing a mask because none of it was me. But when I met other people and I saw an example of what it was like to be happy and joyous and free without the use of substances or this identity I had created for myself, I was like, wow, I'm gonna start following you guys around, and I'm gonna humble myself and just like see what happens. Like, I've never tried to be sober, so I might as well try. So I tried, and I did get sober. And then that sobriety, they call weed a gateway drug. Gateway to programming, societal programming, so you can be like the masses. So what I realized, sobriety was the gateway to enlightenment for me. Sobriety. So sobriety being the gateway to all of the things that gave me an opportunity to connect with a higher power, and most importantly, my higher self, or my inner self. Because in society, we're taught like to chase everything outside of us: more money, more beauty products, more boyfriends or girlfriends, or more attention from our peers, more. But true happiness, from what I've found, is found on the inside, and it's found through the work and self-discovery that we do. So when I got sober, it gave me a clean slate, and then I got to explore some of my true interests in the metaphysics, so astrology, and then I stumbled upon human design a couple years later, and then I stumbled upon tarot cards, and not like dark witchy stuff, although I think that part of a healthy spiritual path, like at some point for everybody. Like, again, we grow up in a really dark society, so we don't know until we know things. So if you ever dabbled in a little bit of darkness growing up, and it led you to the path of enlightenment, or the path of God, or the path of Jesus, or the path of whatever you want to call it, where now you're happy, whole, and complete because of those negative experiences of dabbling in the darkness, then it was probably an experience that you can say was for your highest good. I just found that if I was to stay in that darkness like I did for like a good decade of my life, like just going along with what the masses were doing, like I was going to stay depressed. But what I've learned as I've gotten older is, like, even if I run into some darkness or like make some mistakes along the way, the sooner I can get back to center and ask myself, what am I learning from this? What is the universe trying to reflect back to me? What is it trying to show me through this contrasting experience? Then the better off I am. And I can use that darkness, because it's like the deeper in the dark you go, it's kind of like a slingshot, like pulling back. So it's like, I'm going into something really dark, really hard experience. Oh my God, now I don't want to be here. And then you go like, shh. Versus if I'm just like a normal person and I dabble a little bit, it's not going to like spring me forward that much if I'm only going back a little bit. So I think part of us gifted children, or sensitive souls, or empaths, or highly spiritual people, starseeds, whatever you want to call it, those of us who feel different, who feel like we're here for a purpose, I think there's a part of us that likes to dabble in the dark, that is meant to dabble in the dark, because we're meant to expand so much further. So the key is, and I think the manipulation that's happened in society, is that they try to get us to go to the dark, and then they try to get us to stay there. Because when we stay there, that's when we're robbed of our power, and other people can siphon our energy from us. So how do you, if maybe you're not ready to get sober, so like, what are some other things that you can do or maybe you already are sober, but what are other things that you can do to help with this inner journey? The first thing that was an absolute game changer for me is meditation, because meditation stops the momentum of negative thoughts, negative thinking, negative energy, therefore the negative momentum that you may get yourself into through the law of attraction. The other thing that was huge for me is astrology and human design. And that was so instrumental in helping me find my purpose and helping me understand my personal cycles in life in a way that a doctor or a pill literally never could. Because I remember going into therapy offices and then being prepared with all my research and like, okay, this is my attachment styles. And I've already spent hours and hours and years thinking about, why am I effed up? Why am I effed up? Like, therapist, please save me. And then it's so disheartening when you go to a therapist and you feel like you've done more self-exploration than them. You're just looking for answers and they don't have answers for you. Their answers are simple, like, well, you have a chemical imbalance and you could try this pill and then it might take a couple months to work and then we'll have to probably spend 6 months getting your dose right and you still might feel empty, but you might feel a little better. But once that starts to wear off a couple years later or a couple months later, maybe depending on how sensitive you are, you're gonna, I might provide you with some tools to help, but since we're only meeting once a week, it's probably not going to be enough of a psychic change for you to really propel forward in your life. Now, I might be wrong and maybe I'm biased, but that was my personal experience. So if you're anything like me, like, definitely stick around for this video because I'm going to show you what works for me. And what did work for me was when I finally, like I said earlier, whether the gifted program primed me to be interested in ESP and metaphysics, I still had an interest in that. So astrology always resonated with me. I was a Libra, and I was always just interested in reading horoscopes, right? But I always wondered, like, well, how can every single person, who's a Libra be the same? And we weren't. So that's where most people lose their interest in astrology because it doesn't make sense. But when you dive into astrology and how deep it actually is, astrology is nothing like what the mainstream media shows you. It's nothing like the Sunday funnies. Everyone is extremely unique. We all are a blend of 12 different planetary archetypes, okay? And there's 12 houses in astrology, which means there's 12 places on your zodiac wheel, and each of those houses can be ruled by another planet. So that's going to create so many different energy signatures. Not to mention that your soul was very specific about the exact moment in time that you're born, because a certain stream of neutrinos were coming through the atmosphere at that time and being ejected from the stars and the planets at that time that you were born. So you have an energetic imprint of those neutrinos, which carry particles of information, carry energy signatures, make you an incredibly unique human being. So the natal chart, the exact time you're born, is only going to set the stage though. I didn't know this 10 years ago when I started reading astrology charts and natal charts, but this is a good foundational exercise in astrology. This is the foundational information that you need to pursue astrology more and really get the true value from it. So understanding your natal chart is important, but what's even more important is understanding how that is just setting the stage. So now we're going to start looking at the transiting planets that are changing all the time. So a transiting reading that I get today is going to be different than one I get 5 months from now or a year from now, and very different from one I get 5 years from now. So it's always going to be changing. And the value in getting a transit reading or keeping up with your astrology transits is going to be that you're going to see how these planets and the neutrinos are interacting with you as an individual right now. So if I'm going through a heavy Scorpio period, sometimes those periods can last for 3 years. So what if in that period, I get to the really dark end of Scorpio energy, and I don't understand that Scorpio is the initiation, right? So when you go through the Scorpio periods or the heavy Pisces transits or the ones that are really difficult, you're literally being pulled back because when Sagittarius comes around, you're about to make leaps and bounds forwards. And then after Sagittarius is Capricorn, which is a really positive career period and a really positive ability for you to be seen. So astrology is basically like, okay, at different points in our life, you're probably going to be under the current and swimming against the current for a little bit, but it's training you. So if you know that it's training you and you can say, okay, I just got to get through like this next year and make the best of it, right? And then you can reap huge rewards in the future. But if you're just going through life blindly and you don't understand, like, why is it so hard for me, especially if you're one of the only people who's experiencing such hardships, because all of our charts are set up different ways. Some people experience the hard, tough initiation transits in their early life. So by the time they're adults, they're ready to expand and they're ready to be an example. Other people experience the easy, fun transits as a child, and then when they're an adult, it gets hard for them. So can you imagine your life has been easy and then you have a hard transit and you don't see a light at the end of the tunnel, and you come up with this belief that life is just getting worse. So then you say the meds aren't working, your substances aren't working. I think I just want to go be with my creator, and then you yourself, okay? That has happened, and it happens to a lot of people. And now all of a sudden, imagine having awareness and being able to say, wow, okay, this period is temporary. This is what I'm learning through this. Here's an end date where this is actually going to stop. So if I can just make it through the next couple of miles, it's like running a race, like knowing that if you're running a 25-mile marathon and you've got 5 miles left, like what if you quit right before you reach the finish line? What if you were going down a dark hallway and you were literally 2 feet from the door, but you'd been traveling so long through the dark that you're like, you know what? I don't know when the end is coming back. So I'm just going to go backtrack all those hard miles I just did. And I'm not going to see the blessings right there. That is why I'm so passionate about astrology, because astrology is going to show you where your next blessings lie. But you have to go through the initiation periods first, and it helps to understand what they're trying to teach you. So that's why I love teaching astrology, because it's teaching you energy signatures. So everything that you want to know about astrology can be Googled. I taught myself this. So, and you can go to websites like www.cafeastrology.com, like AstroSeek. You can go look up your progressions. You can look up your transiting planets. You can look up your natal birth chart. If you're a do-it-yourself type of person and you don't have the resources to get a reading from somebody, all of that stuff can be Googled. You can buy books on it. That's what I did. I bought a do-it-yourself relationship astrology book in like sometime early 2000s, and then I taught myself and I read it and I educated myself that way. But if you do have the resources to pay for a reading, I offer transit readings, I offer progressions, I offer numerology reports, I do all of the above, and they're all designed to help you figure out what you're going through currently and what is there to look forward to in the future. Where did you come from? Because how is that shaping your current experiences? What do you have to look forward to? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses right now? But how can you best work with the energy that you're experiencing currently? So if you're interested in that, go ahead, check the description in my YouTube video, and I will, and you can also download my free Gate Kids guide that is going to give you some websites and free resources, but we'll also show you my prices if you are interested in booking a reading, or you can feel free to reach out to me on my social media sites, Instagram or TikTok at Statements by Alex. And another big one that really helped me was human design, because human design is kind of like a step further than astrology. I think it's important to have a solid understanding of astrology before you progress to human design, because human design builds off of astrology, but it also looks at your auric field, your physical body, the chakra systems, and then I Ching, Kabbalah, Tree of Life, and your energetic type, and what chakra system, what is your ideal way of making decisions and moving in this world. So again, anything, I provided all the free resources in my description of my videos and my free Gate Kids and Neurodivergent guide. So you can do Googling and look it all up to interpret those things for you. But again, if you want to work with somebody who's got almost a decade of experience, 2 decades of experience with astrology, and coming up on more years of experience with human design. But if you want to work with me one-on-one, I am very good at reading charts and doing energy reads on people, and then a person is going to be able to spot things that a generic internet site that's not catered to you as an individual is likely to miss or not necessarily going to look at. But again, I believe that everybody should have access to these tools, but I also want to be compensated for my time and energy and expertise. So if you're interested in supporting me in that way, then go ahead and reach out about a human design or astrology reading, because they literally changed my life, and I believe that they will have the power to change yours too. So anyways, I hope this video helped you understand how you might be able to overcome gifted burnout and sensitive person burnout and help you move forward in life. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.